Yes, let's do it. So hi, everyone. Thanks so much for being here for our June 3rd Thursday. I'm Sam Babiak. I'm the program director for the Writers League, and I just have a few announcements before we jump into the conversation. So first up, here at the Writers League, we are a member-based organization. You don't have to live in Texas to join us, but if you want to see more events like this one, we also have online classes and a number of other events that we do. We send authors to schools in Austin. Consider joining us for membership. And so that's just one way to support all of the work that we do. And it brings you events like this one. And so one thing that we do is the 2023 Agent Symposium this year. That's a virtual year-long event aimed at helping demystify the traditional publishing process. And so coming up on Saturday, June 24th, we have our next Agents presentation, Comparison Titles, The Company You Will Keep with Cerise Fisher with Wendy Sherman Associates. And so it's $25 for the presentation. She'll be talking about comparison titles. She'll be in conversation with our executive director, Becca Oliver. And there is also an extended Q&A, so you can ask her any and all questions you have, not just about the topic, but also agenting and traditional publishing in general. So definitely sign up for that if you're at all interested. And one big event that we do every year is our summer writing retreat. And so this summer, we're doing a month-long virtual event. It's 4 weeks. We have 3 classes to choose from, as well as a Writer-Way option. And I'm just going to go through the different options that we have here. So first, we have for our memoirists and personal essayists, on Monday nights, beginning July 10th, we have True Stories Told Well, Memory, Form, and Voice in Memoir and Personal Essay with Rachel Starn. So you'll get to spend 4 weeks with this instructor. There's 2 different registration levels, so you can take the class, get access to everything else that the summer writing retreat has to offer. And if you do level 2, you get all of that, plus a consultation with the instructor. So there's definitely a lot of, community building, honing your craft, and just getting to know the writers here. So that's one option. The other option we have is for fiction writers. And so that is writing the page turner, building suspense in any genre of fiction with Chaitali Sen. And that's on Tuesday nights beginning July 11th. And so if you want to figure out how you keep readers turning pages, this is another 4-week class that you can sign up for. And the third class we're offering is on revision. So Revision Demystified, Moving Your Work to Completion with Stacey Swan. That's on Wednesday nights beginning July 12th. And again, 4 weeks, just spending a lot of time with this really brilliant instructor, learning all things revision and how to take your work to the next level. And finally, we have a 4th option. If you're not ready to commit to a class or you just want time to write and hold yourself accountable throughout the summer, you can join us for our Write-Away option. And so every Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday night of the summer writing retreat, we'll set aside 3 hours. You'll join us for those 3 hours. Write as much as you can. We'll start with a prompt if that's something that you're interested in. And this is also just another great way to hold yourself accountable and also be a part of the summer writing retreat. So you get access to all of those other events that we're doing as well. And our deadline for the 2023 manuscript contest is coming up very soon. So it's on June 20th. So you really just need your first 10 pages and a synopsis to enter. Winners will meet with a literary agent, and all the winners and finalists will be featured in the 2023 WLT Ink List, which is a very special and new thing that we're doing. It's very exciting. And so be sure that you enter before the deadline so you can get a chance to be a winner or a finalist. All right. And our Third Thursdays, we do them every month on the 3rd Thursday of the month. And in July, we have WLT on the craft of writing personal essays with Chris Malcolm Belk and Melissa Falaveno. I'm really excited about this. We'll be looking at personal essays through the lens of these authors' recent essay collections. It's Thursday, July 20th, 7 p.m. CDT, and it's completely free, and you can RSVP for that on our website. And as this night progresses, I'm sure you're going to hear a lot of really wonderful things from our panelists. And so we want to see what you're thinking, what you're talking about in regards to this wonderful event. And so definitely use the hashtag WLT Third Thursday, and we'll be sure to share and respond and amplify all of the good stuff that's happening here tonight. All right, and we've partnered with Book People for this event, which is an indie bookstore here in Austin, Texas. And so be sure to pre-order Katherine Center's Hello Stranger. And we also linked The Bodyguard, her last book, in this webpage as well. So you can buy that one and definitely support this wonderful author, support an indie bookstore. It's something that we always want to do. All right, so that is it for me. I'm going to pass it over to WLT's Executive Director, Becca Oliver, to take it from here.
All right, everyone. Welcome to our June 3rd Thursday, the author-editor relationship. We're so excited to be here tonight with two really wonderful special guests. And so I'm going to introduce them both, and then we're going to dive into our conversation for the evening. So starting with our first panelist, Katherine Center. Bookpage calls Katherine Center the reigning queen of comfort reads. She's the New York Times bestselling author of 9 novels, including How to Walk Away, Things You Save in a Fire, The Bodyguard, and the forthcoming Hello Stranger. Katherine writes laugh and cry books about how life knocks us down and how we get back up. She's been compared to both Jane Austen and Nora Ephron. Not many people, I think, can say that. And the Dallas Morning News calls her story satisfying in the most soul-nourishing way. Her books have made countless best of lists, including Real Simples, Best Books of 2020, Amazon's Top 100 Books of 2019, Goodreads Best Books of the Year. The movie adaptation of Katherine's novel, The Lost Husband, hit #1 on Netflix, and her novel, Happiness for Beginners, will release this summer as a Netflix original starring Ellie Kemper. Katherine's summer book, 2022, The Bodyguard, was an instant New York Times bestseller, a People Best New Books pick, and was nominated for Book of the Year by Book of the Month Club. Bestselling author Emily Henry calls The Bodyguard a shot of pure joy, and bestselling author Helen Huang calls it a perfect feel-good rom-com. Katherine lives in her hometown of Houston, Texas, with her husband, 2 kids, and their fluffy but fierce dog. Please welcome Katherine Center. Thank you so much for being here, Katherine.
So fun to be here. I'm very excited. Thank you for having me.
For sure. Our next guest, Jennifer Enderlin, is the president and publisher of the St. Martin's Publishing Group, where she has worked for 30 years. Her career began in editorial, and she has held every position in that space, starting as an editorial assistant at Berkeley Publishing in 1989. She continues to edit a select number of authors, many of whom she has worked with for many years. And she is someone that I had the pleasure of working with when I started out in publishing at St. Martin's Press. Jennifer Enderlin, thank you so much for being here tonight.
I'm absolutely delighted to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
We are honored. This is a dynamic duo, and I'm so excited to be able to be in this conversation with you. I want to start, though, giving a little background. You know, most of the folks who are tuning in are probably, they're probably in many different places as writers. Maybe they have already published, maybe they're just interested in hearing a little bit more about this relationship between an editor and an author. I think many of them are probably in the early stages of thinking about querying agents and just getting started on the publishing side of things. We spend a lot of time here at the Writers League helping writers understand the publishing world, and especially because it's the sort of entry point, we talk a lot about the agent-author relationship. But to have the chance to have a conversation like this one about what is easily one of the most significant relationships an author is going to have is a joy. And before we jump into it, though, I want to give each of you just a few minutes. You know, we could go on for days, I'm sure, but to give us your origin story. So for you, Katherine, can you just talk to us a little bit about how you came to be a published author?
Oh my God, how many hours do we have?
We have 100 hours. Start.
Yeah, lock the doors, everybody. We're going to be here all night. Yeah, it's been a very slow burn, and it's a good thing I like slow burns because everything about my career has been the opposite of instant gratification. It's just been very, very slowly getting better, very, very slowly finding, the right people at the right moments. And I started out, I wrote my first novel when I was in the 6th grade, and I was like very dorky in the 6th grade and very awkward and very hard on myself and very miserable. And I wound up, I don't know, possibly inventing fan fiction. I'm not sure, but writing basically fan fiction about the 1980s boy band Duran Duran with my best friends. And that, it was like the one bright spot in all of 6th grade. And it was this moment when I like really got hooked on the very particular magic that fiction has, the way it can like change your perspective, inspire you, teach you things that you needed to learn, give you hope, make you laugh, give you something to look forward to. So that was really where I got started. And ever since then, since the age of 12, it has been this very, very slow process of building a career and just basically not quitting, like over and over, thinking I should probably quit, and then just not being able to quit and moving forward and, slowly building. So that's.
And at this point, you've published how many novels?
I think this is 10. I'm bad at math though, but I feel like we're.
And so we're gonna talk through a lot of that, but I'm just curious, your very first, are you with the same agent that you started with? You are. So you went the traditional route, you queried, you found an agent. Can you tell us like a smidge about, was that just a blind query letter? Was that a connection that happened?
It was a Cinderella story. I was at the park. I had written a novel that I had a couple of babies and got too tired to try to find an agent for. And it was ready. It was totally ready. It was like perfect and ready and in a drawer. And I had these babies and I was overwhelmed, and it was like, it had been a couple of years and I hadn't done anything with it. And then I was at the park with my kids one day with another mom who was also at the park with her kids. And she spotted this woman across the way. And she was like, "Don't look now. That is the neighborhood novelist. That woman has a bunch of novels that are published." And I was like, do we have one of those? Like, is that a thing? I didn't know we had a neighborhood novelist. But she marched right over there and she was like, "That's my friend Katherine over there. She's written a novel. It's in a drawer. It's hilarious. Wouldn't you like to help her get it published?" And this like poor, like very sweet, lovely woman who my friend attacked helped me. And she passed my first 3 chapters along to her agent, who was the agent that I still have now, Helen Breitweiser. And she read them and loved them. And like within a week, we were off to the races. So, but this was, I just want to clarify and say, this was after many, 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 many years of failing and just feeling sort of humiliated. I can go into that at any point, but I went to grad school, I got a master's in creative writing. And then it was like 8 years of sending short stories to the New Yorker and getting rejected before I ever got anything accepted. And Helen was sort of my first big break. There was a lot of failure.
I think there's a lot to be learned from that. Like is everyone going to go out to the park this weekend and they run into a novelist? Like some people may, but it's also about, developing connections with in your own community of friends and other people. It's about putting yourself in spaces where people know that you're working on this and they want to connect you with other people who are doing the same thing. So it's a Cinderella story, but I think there's a lot of cool, stuff to be gleaned there for other people. Jen Enderlin, what's your origin story?
Well, I was one of those kids, one of those precocious 5th and 6th graders who was reading all the adult novels. I was reading the Sidney Sheldons and the Stephen Kings, and I wasn't reading my age group. When I got into 7th, 8th grade, I started reading racy historical romances. I had my nose in a book all the time. It wasn't things I was assigned to read by teachers. It was things that I literally found in the grocery store, in bookstores, and I sort of rebelled against what I was supposed to read, and I read what I wanted to. I was an English major in college, and because I thought, oh, well, I like to read, what should I do? I'll go be an English major. And doing that, I took a lot of creative writing classes. And what that showed me is that I was not a writer. I didn't like that part of it. I could kind of do it, not well, but I realized the part that jazzed me was reacting to other people's works. I like reacting. I don't like creating. It's kind of like, do you want to be the cook in the kitchen, or do you want to be the person eating the food in the restaurant? And I would much rather be the person eating the food in the restaurant. And by taking all those creative writing classes, that's what kind of led me to that discovery. And so I'm really glad I did that. When I got out of college, I knew that I wanted to be in the job that made those books. And I graduated college on a Saturday, came back to live with my parents in New Jersey on a Sunday. My sister knew someone who worked in the production department at Berkeley. She got me an interview that Monday. And I didn't know it at the time. I didn't realize how lucky this was, but sort of a Cinderella story like you too, Katherine. The lady in human resources, or personnel, as they called it back then, kind of took a liking to me in the interview. And she said, you can interview for 2 jobs here. You can interview to be the assistant to the editor-in-chief of Putnam, which was hardcover, or you can be the assistant to a senior editor who works in mass market and does a lot of genre books. And I thought, genre books, oh, I know those. Those are in the supermarket. And I thought, I'll go and interview to be the assistant to the woman that does genre books. And in a way, it was the luckiest thing I ever did, because you might think, oh, we'll go to the hardcover, more prestigious editor-in-chief job. But I didn't do that. I went to the paperback line, and it was lucky because that was a time when mass market paperbacks, the little rack size paperbacks that you see in the airports and supermarkets, but don't see that much anymore. The rack size paperbacks were booming. And I was right out of college, and they said to all of us assistants, go scour the slush pile, find us Westerns, find us romance, find us mystery, just find books. And I signed up the first book that I ever published 2 weeks after I graduated from college. They let me sign up a novel. It was a horror novel called Voodoo Fury. And on the cover of it was a little boy with a regular boy head and a voodoo body. And the line said, they defied the voodoo law. They must pay the voodoo price. and I still have a copy of it to this day.
Oh my gosh.
Probably because it was the first book that you're in those acknowledgements, right?
Yes. Yep. Exactly.
Amazing pride, and I would love for you to take a beat as we go further to just talk about, in publishing, it really is an apprenticeship industry. So a lot of people go into it not even really knowing how to edit, not knowing what editing means. It's more
what teaches you editing. I took one class in college called editing. It happens to be the class where I met my husband, by the way. I met him in editing class. But you didn't really, that's not where you learn to edit. That's not where you learn to do it.
Yeah. How did you learn to edit?
You learn by reading constantly and reading with an analytical mind. It's very different. Editing is very different from reading for pleasure. So you have to turn on a different part of your brain. When I read for pleasure, it's kind of like I'm an airline pilot and I'm on the plane and I know what all the noises mean and I know what's happening, but I'm not in charge. When I'm editing a book, it's like I want to help land this plane right. So you turn on a more focused, analytical part of your brain. You still have to be intuitive, but you have to be analytical as well. And you have to practice. You have to practice reading and constantly saying to yourself, do I like this? Why do I like this? Why don't I like this? Why am I engaged with this? Why am I not engaged with this? What's happening? What you have to practice gauging your emotional responses as you're reading. And the only way you could do that is by reading a ton and doing that a ton.
Yeah. So, okay. So how did you two meet? What is, to borrow the phrase, what is your meet cute?
I was thinking about this and I want to answer this question. What year did we buy? If you could, I can answer it from my perspective. If you tell me, do you remember the year we bought Happiness for Beginners? What year was that?
Happiness for Beginners came out in 2015. So I think you probably got it in 2014, I'm guessing.
Mm-hmm. Or 20, I think it might've been 2013.
Okay.
So I'm president and publisher of the company. Back then I was an editor. So what happened was the book was submitted by Katherine's agent, but not to me. It was submitted to another editor, and I was a reader on it, and I loved this book. I loved Happiness for Beginner, and I was a supporter and saying, yes, we should buy this. That editor went back to grad school, I believe, and our then editor-in-chief at the time assigned Katherine to a different editor. And I remember thinking, what? I wanted Katherine. But it would be, I sort of felt like it would be sort of bad form to swoop in and say, give that to me. Except that editor actually, sometimes there is turnover in publishing. That editor left. And before Katherine could be reassigned, I went hot-footing it over to the editor-in-chief's office. And I'm like, Katherine Center is not getting away from me this time. I want Katherine Center. And that's how we got to
And was that, oh my gosh, I love this story so much. And was that before Happiness for Beginners was even published? So did those two editors leave before the book published, or was the book already on its way? And wow.
I think Katherine, Happiness for Beginners was underway. I did not edit that book. I did not edit Happiness for Beginners.
No.
So you had one book under your belt with St. Martin's by the time I came on.
Yes, and thank you for that, by the way. Thank you for taking me. Thank you for coming and getting me.
Yes, I was determined.
Well, and also that is the thing that we hear about, and writers bring it up often. And I have to say, often you hear it as a much sadder story, that a writer is attached to an editor, and the editor, for whatever reason, leaves the publishing house. And there's, we use that phrase orphan, but they leave the publishing house, and you end up with someone, and sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad, but it's never quite the same because it's not the person that you arrived with. And this is such a beautiful example of how that can work out, and also the commitment of a publishing house to make sure that it does work out, that the author ends up with an editor that is excited about it. I love it. So
since then, Katherine, what I was going to say, what have we done together? We did How to Walk Away, Things You Saved. Yeah, you do it.
How to Walk Away, Things You Save in a Fire, What You Wish For, which came out in 2020, and then The Bodyguard was last summer, and now we're doing Hello Stranger, and then we have this brand new book that I just turned into you. That's
this week
for 2020.
Yep, that'll be for 2024. So that's 6 we've done together.
Feels like a lot of math. I think that sounds right.
So before I want to talk about Hello Stranger. I want to use it as sort of a case study of what happens as you go through the process together. But I think I would love, before we do that, to kind of bird's eye view, say to both of you, as you look back on this experience, these 6 books now that you've worked together on, what has changed? Like, meaning, is there some kind of, difference in terms of rhythm, or difference in terms of the way you work together that has evolved over time? And what has stayed the same? Like, is there anything that you've noticed over the course of those 6 books that you could point to show kind of the way that your relationship has, I don't know, deepened or evolved?
Katherine, do you feel like maybe, do you feel like now we're in a rhythm together? And if you feel like a book isn't going down the right path, you might speak up quicker?
I definitely would. Yeah, for sure. That's a lesson I learned with What You Wish For years ago. I wrote this book, and, I'm very swirly, like my brain goes in circles. Like, if you could open up the side of it, it would be like there'd be like a grand piano going, but it's like a tornado in there. I'm not a logical, organized person, but I try very hard with anything professional to be really, really good about deadlines. And I kind of pride myself on being good about deadlines. And so I don't turn things in late. And I when I know that a book is due in May, I gear my entire life, for the 6 to 8 months before that towards making sure that I'm giving myself the time I need to get that book in on time. I mean, that becomes my whole guiding structure. And with What You Wish For, I turned it in May as asked. But after I turned it in, I kind of realized it wasn't really working. Sometimes you just have an idea and you think it's going to work, and then you get in there and it's not really coming together for whatever reason. I think Jen was so nice about it, and I'm so grateful for that, because you do have to be able to kind of take risks. You have to be like, I think this is going to be good. I'm going to try this. Like, you don't want to be timid or like afraid to try anything different or new, but it didn't really work. And so then Jen and I like got down, like rolled up our shirt sleeves and we were like, what do we need to do to this book to like turn it around? And so I then wound up ripping it apart, reordering everything and putting it back together all like in the next few months, right? But it was a very tight deadline and I was doing a lot of traveling and everything about it was stressful, but I'm very like obedient and I'm very grateful to be at St. Martin's and I madly love Jen and I wish I could just like build a little like hut outside of her home and like throw flowers at her like as she goes from work every day, because I'm so grateful to be there. Like I just thank my lucky stars every day. So I wanted to be good. I want to be like a perfect author and I never want to mess anything up or be late or have a problem. And so I worked really, really hard and I did in the end get that book together and we did, continue on with our production schedule. But what I've learned from that is that was a real cattywampus way to do it. And I have a way that I like to work that works well, right? And so I think next time, if that ever happens again, knock on wood, maybe it will. But if it happens again, I will speak up way sooner in the process and be like, I think this isn't coming together. I might need some more time.
Mm-hmm. And so early in the process, when we're talking about whether it's, Hello Stranger or The Bodyguard or any new novel for you, Katherine, are you talking to Jen early in the stages of an idea sparking and kind of bouncing ideas off? Or do you hold on to what you're thinking about and kind of get it to a certain place? Jen, is there a way that you prefer to work with with an author in terms of when you want to hear about a project, when you want to actually be engaging with the idea? So I would start with you, Katherine, just hear like kind of what your process is and get a sense of how you two manage that early part, that spark.
So Jen, tell me if your sense of this is different, but my sense of it is that we talk a bit early on. I want to make sure that she likes the idea because I really think the idea of a story, like the basic sort of plate tectonics of the pieces that are pushing up against each other and sort of arranged, like pressing up against each other, need to be right. I feel like if you don't have that on the ground floor, you'll never get it later, right? So the big elements of the story really have to be there. The idea has to be something that's got a great hook to it that makes people like, ooh, like what's that about kind of story. So I always want to make sure that Jen likes that idea and thinks it's viable and like got meat to it and is compelling. And then, so we talk kind of late summer. And then my sense of it these days, especially, is that I then kind of go away like a little animal and I'm just gone, all year. And I'm just writing. And that's good for me because I think for me, so much about finding the story is just quietly finding my own compass on like, if I had a free Saturday and a fuzzy blanket and a hot cup of tea, what would I want this story to be if I were reading it, And so I just get very quiet and try to find that, sort of get centered in myself. And then my sense is that like, then I give it to Jen. Like this year I was one day early on turning it in. I was very pleased with myself, but just getting it in and then Jen reads it and then she gives me beautiful feedback. I mean, she's like a genius at feedback because she says things to you that are so helpful, but that also feel really encouraging. Like I have never come away from a conversation with Jen feeling discouraged or like hating myself or, any of those things that writers are prone to. I always come away like raring to go. Like, these are great suggestions. I'm so excited. And then she reads it one or two more times and kind of comes back with a few more, sort of like digs in deep with ideas or like, I don't understand why this happened, or I would love to see more of this character, or could we spend a little more time on this thing? And then we kind of keep moving on into the process. That's kind of my feeling on how it works.
Yeah, and I was going to say, when Katherine and I talk, she'll come to me, and it's usually maybe it'll be a snippet of an idea, like a paragraph that you send me, and then we talk about it. But it's basically what you want to hear in the early stages is, this is going to be a novel about this because this, and then this happens, and then that happens. That's all I really want to know, is like the high concept, and she sends me a high concept idea, and then we talk and riff on it. Like I'll say, oh, that's so cool. And what about if this was going on as well? Or what about if the character had this in their background or something like that. And then I believe you do a short like 2-page or 3-page outline?
So I definitely have in the past. I know early on I used to send you like 2 or 3 chapters so you could kind of get a sense of what where we're starting. And I definitely early on did send you. I don't know that I did that for Hello Stranger though. I could be wrong. I have a terrible memory, but I feel like Jen was just like, I love it, go. And then I went. Maybe I sent you stuff. I can't remember.
If she does, it's not. I don't want to see outlines that are so crazy. One time somebody like handed in a 40-page outline. I don't want to read that. Like, that's not, you can't even judge a book that way. It's like, it's overly detailed and yet not detailed enough. So I think if anything, it's just the bones of the idea. Is it going to run or not? Do I foresee any problems? And if not, then Katherine's right. She's just off and running. She goes and I get a first draft.
And I should clarify for folks, and please tell me if I'm misrepresenting here, but we're talking about 2 people who have been working together for a while, and also Katherine has been publishing for a while. So certainly at the start, when you're presenting a full manuscript to an editor in order to get sort of going, and oftentimes even occasionally for writers, it will include the second book. You're going to need to show a full manuscript in order to, continue going. But then I imagine a point where it's like, all right, I know what Katherine Center can do. I know what a Katherine Center novel is. Now I want to know what the idea is. And then you continue doing, a contract based on like sort of that mutual understanding. Would that be correct? I mean, so if we were talking second book, we'd be talking about a full manuscript, but now instead we're talking about ideas and sort of generating ideas and moving forward. Yeah. So what about, what is the time here, the amount of time, just to give folks a ballpark that, you go away and write, Katherine, you 2 start talking, you start going back and forth on the pages. Is that 3 months? Is that 6 months? Is that 9 months? I know it's different for every project, but even Jen, with your sort of experience, could you give some writers out there an idea of how long that can take?
Well, every author really is different. I mean, but I would say with Katherine, from idea to first draft, was it about 9 months, would you say, Katherine?
Yeah. I do research kind of in the sort of late summer, early fall, and then I start writing. So yeah, I mean, there's book season in the summer. I'm on like tour for the last book, and then as soon as all that dies down, I start working on the next book. So it's sort of through the fall. And then like the one we just did, I turned in April. And then Jen is so fast. She's like such a fast reader. It's astonishing. So she had it over the weekend and was back, with comments right after that. Wow. And then I went back on her comments, and then she had a few more comments, and then I went back on that. And now we're basically sort of done, I think, with the process. It's gone to copy editing, and we're sort of on to the next thing. So it's maybe like 2.5 months that we were kind of back and forth.
Yeah. And I like to be fast. I really do. I like to be fast because first of all, I can really focus. I'm able to focus in a concentrated period of time, and that's the best way to edit for me. If I were to edit a book over the period of like 2 or 3 weeks, I would lose my focus and concentration. And I also know the author is waiting with bated breath. The author is, they want to hear from you. So I don't like to torture anybody. I want to do it as quickly as I can, because I know actually that's the best process for me as an editor, is to do it in a concentrated, focused amount of time.
Yeah.
So what happens if you don't agree with a note, Katherine? How does that, and what happens when there's a disagreement on something about the story? I know it's obviously dependent on the situation, but we're just curious if you could share with us how that works, how you both kind of work through, maybe I said in my notes to you, difficult conversations, but just, those moments when maybe there's a disagreement.
Let me just start by saying that it's always ultimately the author's book. So if I have a problem with something in a book and the author doesn't agree with it, it doesn't mean that I'm right and they're wrong. It means that I'm indicating some kind of issue or problem that the author needs to take a look at. And what I might be wrong about my diagnosis, But I'm just holding something up to the light for the author to look at. For example, if I said like I'm not engaging with this character at all. They're flat, they're dull. It might not be that they're flat and dull. That might just be my diagnosis. It might be that we haven't explored their backstory enough. So the good trusting relationship with an author is where I can say something and the author might say, well, I disagree, but let's talk about it. Why aren't you engaged? You must be having an issue because you wouldn't have brought it up if you didn't, and maybe there's something else going on. It's kind of like going to the doctor with a pain in your arm. It doesn't mean your arm is broken. It means there might be something else going on.
Yeah. So I should start by saying I've been edited by lots of people over these many years that I've been doing this. And I have never loved anybody the way that I love Jen. And so I think that part of it for me is that in any situation where she's coming to me with comments, I'm assuming they're all going to be brilliant. Like I'm already, like I go into it assuming like she's here to help me. She knows what she's talking about. This woman is brilliant. Like everything that she says, I take really, really seriously. And actually, How to Walk Away was my first book to ever hit the New York Times bestseller list. It was Jen's book. And then when it was time for to write the next book, we went to lunch and we're hanging out. And of course, I'm very starstruck sitting there at lunch with Jen. And she's saying, well, what do you think your next book is going to be about? And I was like, oh gosh, I don't know. I've got some ideas. I'm sort of, thinking about stuff. And then Jen goes, well, there's a lady firefighter in How to Walk Away. And I thought, I'd love to know more about her. Like, could she get a book? Like, could you write a book about her? And it's a great idea. And I recognized that it was a great idea. I actually am married to a guy who's a volunteer firefighter. And the idea of trying to write about that world was very intimidating to me. So I went home and I really struggled with it. I was like, I know Jen is brilliant. I know this is a good idea. I also feel really scared to write this book. But I found a way into that idea because I trusted her so much and I knew she was right deep down. And it's one of the best books I've ever done. Like it turned out amazing. It turned out so much bigger than anything I had tried to do before. And it worked and it was great. So,
but I never would have come to that if you hadn't created a very minor character in How to Walk Away. I mean, this lady firefighter had one line, but that one line she had in the book was so great that it made me so intrigued by her. She wasn't a stock minor character wandering onto the page. With her one line, she was a fully formed, living, breathing character. And that's what a writer does. That is something I could never do. That is a gift for an author to make a character come alive with one line is something that I am in awe of. It's a magic that I do not possess.
Well, and I think hearing you both talk about those moments when maybe there are ideas or thoughts that there's feedback, there's work that has to be done, there's conversation that is either difficult or just challenging, and that you're able to do it and really support each other through it and understand ultimately that it's in service to the book itself and to the project is part of kind of finding the right fit as an editor, right? And the right author editor fit. And I'm wondering, Jen, if you have any suggestions for writers who, oftentimes when there's a book that is being bid on by a number of different editors have the opportunity to meet the author and kind of talk to them about what their vision is and what they would do. And it gives the author the opportunity to ask some questions and to get a sense of who that editor is and whether it might be a good fit. Do you have any suggestions for writers who are lucky enough to be in that position? What kinds of things they might want to ask or things they might want to listen for that might help them figure out if this is going to be a good fit for them?
I would ask an editor, can you describe your editorial process? How do you work? How do you like to work with editors? What are some with authors? I would say to the editor, what are the parts of the editorial process that you don't like? So if you're an author and you really do want to have an editor that gives a fast response, if you ask the question, what are some of the parts of the editorial process that you don't like? And the editor says, oh, well, I hate being rushed so much and I really like to take my time, that'll be a flag for you. Like, listen for those things, but ask the editor always to describe their editorial process, describe what they enjoy about editing, what bothers them about editing. Ask them for examples of books that they've worked on. What are some of the novels that you worked on that you're most proud of? That kind of thing, and why. Those are some of the questions I would ask.
Right? Like understanding who you are as a writer and the communication style that's important to you, things that you're looking for. It's so true. So true. So then I do want to go to the agent piece of this, because I'm wondering, Katherine, where your agent fits in. Do you show your agent your manuscripts before you deliver them? Or are you at this point really, I mean, obviously the agent is extremely important in this relationship, I would guess. And Helen's doing a lot of stuff to keep this book moving and doing what she needs to do. But are you kind of now exclusively really working, doing all of your editorial work and developing of ideas with Jen?
Yeah, I would say that the writing piece of it happens with Jen. But I do, when I send stuff to Jen, I CC Helen, because Helen wants to see it too. She's excited. She's a reader. So she reads it, and she does also give me feedback. It's not like at all like Jen's. It's more like I just wrote a book that's set in LA, and Helen lived in LA for a long time, and she wrote back and she was like, yeah, nobody ever picks anybody up at the airport in LA. That's not a thing. And it was like helpful, I was like, well, I don't live there, so thank you. But so it's that kind of thing from her. But Helen's like my person to talk to about business things. If I have a contract I need to read over, if I'm, just wondering about like, how does this work? And here's all this businessy stuff. She's kind of, that's how I divide it out in my head. Jen is stories and Helen is business.
And so you've got the manuscript, it's ready, it's going into copy editing. Can you just, our conversation here is focused on this author-editor relationship, but Jen, I'm wondering if you could just take a couple seconds and talk about what's happening inside the publishing house next, and what kind of ways that you might be turning to Katherine and saying, okay, here's some stuff I need from you, or here's some things that I need you to do to help me do my job now as cheerleader, and, all of the things that I need, marketer, and all of these things that I need to do to keep it moving through the process.
So right now the book will be going into copy editing. That will be Katherine's book for next summer. It's going to be June of 2024 that it comes out. And publishers work really far in advance. Like, for example, on this Tuesday, June 20th, we have our first launch meeting for the summer list. And it's great that Katherine's book is done, because now people can start reading it even before launch meeting. We'll probably get some people who will be reading it this weekend just because they love Katherine so much. So on June 20th, that's the first time the whole company hears about the book. And that's for our summer 2024 list. All the editors talk about the books on their list. It's literally picture a meeting room. We used to do it in person, but now it's so much more efficient. We do it on Google Hangouts. And the editors will come and describe the book, describe the author's history, describe the potential we see for the book. And this gives all the sales, marketing, and publicity people a chance to absorb the books on that list and to start formulating their strategies. Then in July, again, so we're like about a year out from pub, we start having real drill down meetings. We have what we call vision meetings, and vision meetings are basically the publisher and the editors and the marketing and publicity and salespeople. We ask ourselves, what would success look like to us with this book? What are we trying to accomplish this book? And we sort of then start to formulate tactics for achieving our goals. Sometime in the fall, then we start having sales conference. That's where plans are more solidified. We have a jacket. Well, also we work on the cover, probably July, August, September. September, we go to sales conference. September, October, we go to sales conference. And that's when plans are solidified, covers are formulated, salespeople have their targets. And then salespeople start to sell the book, sometimes 8-9 months before publication. They get all their ammunition in place so that they are prepared to sell the book to the accounts, whether that's your independent bookstore, your Barnes and Noble, your Target, your Walmart, your Costco, your Amazon. We have sales reps for all these different channels, and the process of selling begins. And then then the publicity people, they get ARCs, maybe 6 to 7 months, that's advanced reading copies. And the publicity people start to try to create buzz. They work with their contacts. They get the books into hands of tastemakers and reviewers. It's a real elaborate process that goes into publishing a book. Everything from dealing with publicity and them getting people revved up about the book to the more mundane things like ordering paper and setting print runs and things like that. So it's a big machine, and the wheels start to turn very early.
And I will say, at the risk of this turning into a Jen Enderlin fan club meeting, that I just remember those launch meetings at St. Martin's, where we would be in that 17th floor conference room, where it was just jam-packed with chairs, people around a huge table, and everybody sat up straighter when Jen sat down, because you had a way of talking about your books and talking about your projects and your authors that just brought everybody so much energy. And I'm just wondering, and that is such a big part of being an editor, is being able to take this excitement that you have for this book that you've been living with for a while and convey it in a short amount of time to a bunch of people, one after the other, sitting there for hours and hours in a meeting. What do you do to prepare for that? I guess I'm just curious, like what that's like for you at launch, and what kinds of things either your authors are giving you, or you're finding and identifying that are going to do that for you.
Well, I would say this might sound counterintuitive, but I'm going to say the way I am effective at launch meetings, and kind of always have been, comes from a place of, I make the assumption, this is going to sound funny, I make the assumption that no one wants to hear what I have to say. I make that assumption, because by making that assumption, I am convincing them that they should care. I don't assume people should care. I don't assume that they're interested. In fact, I take the opposite tact. I think the biggest mistakes editors make when they're presenting a book in a launch meeting is they've assumed that they have their audience. They assume and they drone on, and they go into too much detail about the plot, and they lose the room. So I take the opposite tact.
Can I just jump in and say, I do the exact same thing when writing novels. I assume that nobody wants to read your novel, and that you have to seduce them, pull them in, charm them, and make them want to stay there. And I never ever take anything for granted. The days of Victorian life where you're sitting around on your estate with nothing to do and you're just going to read any novel that comes along are no longer with us, they ever were.
Well, and this is so helpful, because we have a lot of folks who are listening who are part of our big agent symposium that we're doing. And next week they are doing pitch sessions with agents. And, what I say all the time when I talk about query letter writing, when I talk about the pitch process, is you pitch, but so does an agent. An agent pitches to an editor pitches to their publishing house. And to hear you, Jen, talk a little bit about the way that you think about it, I think is probably helpful to folks. I also am wondering how you think about comparison titles, just to take a beat there, because that is a big piece of sitting down in that launch meeting and talking about, who do you compare Katherine Center to? I'm wondering, who do you do comparison titles when you talk about, Katherine's novels or your other writers?
You would mostly do comparison titles if, Katherine has a history, a sales history in our house.
Everyone knows who Katherine Center is. Yeah,
they do. But I know that sounds opposite of what I said in terms of I take the assumption that no one wants to hear, but that's when I'm describing the book. But I think comparisons can get overused. You could be not since John Grisham. It's just, I think you have to be very careful with comparisons, because they get overused and it's a sloppy shorthand. And I think it's better to say things like, remember that remember that feeling you had when you first looked across the lunch table in 6th grade and fell in love with someone. That's the kind of feeling you get in this book, rather than saying like, this is like Ellen Hildebrand, or I don't know. I would hesitate on the heavy use of comparisons, because I think people don't trust them because they get overused so much.
Right. And I think also it is different as an editor. You can say, you know, for a writer, it might be harder to say, my book is going to bring you to tears the way that you were the first time you lost a pet when you were 5 years old. Sometimes, you know, as an editor who's talking about another person's work, it's a little, you can draw on those sort of emotional statements, which sometimes as a writer is a little harder to do, I think, when you're describing your own work. I was going
to say, I do think if you're a writer pitching to agents, maybe they might like that shorthand, will appeal to readers of blank, blank, and blank.
Yeah.
I think, do you agree, Katherine? Like maybe if you're an unpublished author pitching to agents, they want
helpful for like debut, right? Where you really need to
People
like
don't know who you are and you can liken yourself to something that they're familiar with. I think that definitely helps.
The reality is a lot of people are probably writing in query letters that they are writing like Katherine Center.
They are.
Now or someone
Katherine is used as
you are a comparison title, and maybe become a comparison title tonight for someone who's listening in to this conversation. So I want to talk about a couple other things. I don't want to linger too long, but what about covers? Can you talk about how you two, what is that process like in terms of Katherine's part of looking at cover possibilities? Jen, how does that work within the house? And then Katherine, how do you sort of handle the cover conversation?
And Katherine's very visual, so but do you want me to go, Katherine, or do you want to go?
You go first.
I was going to say, because I could talk a little bit about the cover process for How to Walk Away, because I think, I don't know if you could picture, I don't know if any of you are familiar with that cover, but it's a red cover. It has cut out paper flowers on it. It has a sort of recessed red plane on it. But we took a long time to get to that cover. Oh, Katherine went to go get it. Yeah. We took a long time to get to that cover. Katherine, do you remember?
Yes.
We saw, and it was my first time working with Katherine, and we had a few designs, several designs that we showed Katherine, and I think you were polite, and but they were not, you weren't feeling it, and neither was I, really. You know, but I'm just like, I wanted to show you the covers because getting your reaction even negatively helps me get to where we need to be. Because the cover, it's really important that the cover reflect the mood and the tone of what's inside. And I do remember having an epiphany with our art director, and I said, you have to go, I think I said, you have to go on Katherine's Pinterest page, because Katherine's aesthetic is what her books are like. What Katherine looks like, the flowers on her walls, the feeling you get from that, that's what Katherine's like. So you have to, and I knew that you would love a cover that had the right feeling, and you're so visual. And I remember saying to the art director, go to Katherine's Pinterest board, and also just remember, Katherine is the person who wears a sparkly barrette in her hair right here. Like that's, and when I said that to the art director, she kind of got it. She got it, you know. But we were showing covers at first that were, I think if they had some soft muted colors, I think they had like a little plane in the sky with clouds. I think we did that. They were sort of pastel, and Katherine's not pastel to me. She's not. And once we knew who Katherine was, we could get the right cover. You know?
I feel like this cover like captured my soul, my writing soul. This is, I would get it on a tattoo. I probably should somewhere.
I remember the Happiness for Beginners cover that we originally did, the first cover for Happiness for Beginners. And I wasn't part of that design process then, but it was just like what you'd picture. It was like a woman in silhouette standing on a cliff at sunset with white type. And it, you know, it didn't have much personality.
I I fought that cover very, very, very hard. I was like, this looks like a self-help book from the 90s. And actually, that was for Happiness for Beginners, which has a new cover now. And this is the new cover that got redesigned to kind of, go with.
Catherine, you don't happen to have the first Happiness for Beginners, do you?
I don't think I have it. I've got one somewhere. I don't want to say it's been banished, but I don't.
That is a part of it, right? Like you have developed this kind of look now where you can tell there is an aesthetic to just a Katherine Center book. And they each look different, but they each have this great kind of aesthetic that's recognizable.
Well, I madly love the designer, Olga Grilich. I met her at the Macmillan offices a few years ago and I hugged her around the neck and I wouldn't let go. I was like, you changed my life with this cover. Like you did such an amazing job. But I don't know if I was right. I think I was probably writing to you, Jen, and not to Olga on this one because I didn't know her yet. But I remember you asked me, you said, like, what do you think what would you like to see the cover have? Or, what would you like to see? And I love that I was so honored that you asked me that because I am obsessed with covers. I think a lot of writers are obsessed with covers and I'm not a designer, so I don't know how to do it necessarily, but I definitely know it when I see it. When you see a really good book cover, you're like, that's a great book cover. So I wrote to Jen and I said, I think a really good book cover needs to be bright, so it stands out amongst all the other covers, and it needs to be legible at a thumbnail size, right? Because everybody's scrolling on their phones. You need to be able to read that title when it's this big, I thought. And then, and I said, and I think it needs to make you a little bit curious about what's going on inside. So maybe whatever the images are and the text and how they work together should be maybe a little bit, like, hey, what's going on there? I would now also say, I think it needs to capture the emotions of the book in some way, like capture some vibe. But How to Walk Away is about a woman who is in a plane crash on the day she gets engaged, and that is this opening chapter. And then the whole rest of the book is about her trying to bounce back from this sort of disaster in her life. And so Olga put this little red plane, which a lot of people don't even see, but there's a little plane on here. And then the flowers, at the very end of the book, she winds up getting these third-degree burns on her neck and shoulder. And at the very end of the book, her sister, who's a tattoo artist, tattoos flowers over the scars. And it's just a little throwaway thing. It's in the epilogue. But I was like, maybe we could do like a plane that has flowers on it or something with the flowers on a plane. And this is what Olga came up with. And the minute I saw it, like my eyes filled up with tears and I was like, oh, this is it. This is it. So, and we've stuck with some version of flowers ever since. Like The Bodyguard was kind of I have them all here. The Bodyguard was kind of a new look last summer, different, more illustrated, but we kept the flowers and they're on the spine. So like, if you have them on your shelf, you can have a little garden going.
So can I ask also just about the hardcover and then paperback publication and what maybe you two are talking about as you're getting ready to launch a book as in its paperback life, and if there are certain things conversations that happen between the two of you that might be interesting to the folks who are listening, like what are you revisiting? Are you thinking about relaunching? Or are you talking mainly about the hardcover that's coming and how it's going to lift the paperbacks, all the paperbacks? What is the conversation between the two of you when a paperback's getting ready to go?
The paperback it's a format that is extremely important because not everyone can afford a hardcover, and some people really prefer the physical feel of a trade paperback. So it's a chance to get readers who don't read an ebook. They're not going to listen to audio. They're not buying a hardcover. They want the portability, the shareability of a trade paperback. And it also is kind of a heralding of the new hardcover that's coming. It's like, okay, because here's this paperback's coming. That means a new hardcover is on the horizon. So we like to have the two books really work in synergy with one another. We always put a teaser chapter for the new hardcover in the back of the trade paperback. And it's all part of a synergistic publishing plan that we utilize to get new readers and to herald the new hardcover that's coming.
But yeah, to answer your question, I don't think that Jen and I talk very much about the paperbacks, because I think the work is really around the hardcovers. It's getting the story where it needs to be, you know, and there's a little bit of discussion. I mean, at this point, it's been long enough. There's a little bit of discussion about covers, but not too much anymore, because we've kind of found a groove with that.
Mm-hmm.
We have, you know, it's always about, there's always a back and forth about titles and finding like great titles. I mean, we've emailed each other in the middle of the night about titles, just ideas coming and trying to find the right thing. So that's a bit, you know, so it's all about that. For me, it's all about that hardcover. And then once you've kind of done all that work, then when the paperback comes out, it's like, well, we already know it's all settled. And now, so the paperback came out of The Bodyguard. Do you want me to get it? It looks just the same. So here's the paperback of The Bodyguard. It just came out. And here's the hardcover. So they're very similar.
Right. So you're not even, I mean, you guys have such a system in terms of like, you have such a great look to what you're publishing in hardcover that you're really just building on and keeping. It's not about reinventing. It's about just reinforcing and then opening it up to a larger readership, the paperback, which makes
definitely
sense. Yeah. So I want to ask you, and then I'm going to encourage folks, if you have any lingering questions, to drop them in the Q&A box. But I want to ask you each, keeping in mind that we have a lot of folks who are listening who have not published a book yet, who are, you know, in some step of the journey towards, you know, hoping that they reach the point where they have a book on the shelf, and where they have the you know, joy of having a relationship with an editor, the way that you two have worked together. So what is your advice for those folks? What is your advice to first-time authors as they're making their way? What kind of words of wisdom would you want them to take from you? I'm going to start with you, Katherine, and kind of from your perspective now, if you could go back in time and talk to you before you walked into that park, what would you say?
You know, I think about this a lot, and I get asked this question a lot. So the first thing I would say is that you have to write because you love the process of writing. Like, you have to be there for the right reasons, and you have to not get into it because you think you're going to get rich, and not get into it because you think you're going to get famous, and not get into it because you, like, you know, want to stick it to some ex who didn't appreciate you. Like, none of those are reasons to do it. You kind of have to, like, the writing itself and the process of getting to be a person who spends her or his life thinking about stories all the time and just getting lost in stories and just savoring the work that you're doing and the work that everybody else is doing also, like that's the reward for writing. That's it. That's all it is. And then, you know, that's the thing that sustains you, because that's where the joy is, right? That's where the love and the happiness and the sunshine comes from, is that love of playing with words and hanging out with imaginary people and, you know, figuring out how stories work and obsessing over this. I've been obsessing over this my whole life. You know, where is that magic? Where does it come from? How do you access it? How do you harness it? How do you wield it? How do you use it in service to other people and yourself too, by the way, because you are also a reader of your own work. So I think about that all the time. And that's the thing that's nourishing. The publishing part of it has wonderful, glamorous, exciting components to it. And it also has like worried, stressful, oh my God, the pandemic is coming, what am I going to do moments to it. And, you know, it's harder. And for me, it's been such a long, slow journey and I'm so grateful for literally everything. I mean, there's nothing I won't do for these people at St. Martin's. I'll do anything for you guys. I'm so grateful that I have a home there. But the thing I will say, the two things I will say about writing when you're just starting out, my two best pieces of advice are, one is to practice the art of self-encouragement, right? I think sometimes when we're writers, we want to be really hard on ourselves because it makes us feel like we're taking our work seriously and we're not being easy on ourselves and we're not letting ourselves get away with anything. And so we get really, really good at criticizing. But I think actually too much of that is inhibiting and will keep you from trying stuff, right? Keep you from being brave, keep you from being creative. It just clamps you down. And I think what you really want to do to be a writer is open, right? Open up. And so you have to have that critical voice. You can't just say everything is equally great, that, I've written my first draft and it's perfect, let's publish it. You can't do that. You have to be able to look at your work in a critical way. Like, is this working? Is this doing what I wanted to do? Could it be shorter? Could it be funnier? Could it be punchier? Do I need to slow down and linger on this moment? Do I need to speed up and skip over it? You need to be able to critically evaluate what you're doing. But this other part of it is that you also really, really, really need to give yourself permission to be happy and excited when it's working, and notice when it's working, right? When you've written something that's funny, or when you've written something that makes you cry. In every book, I write things that make me laugh out loud and that also make me cry as I'm writing them. Mm-hmm. And to me, I always really try to enjoy that moment. I'm like, this is definitely working on me, at least, right? I write jokes that 2 years later, I'll in books, 2 years later, I'm brushing my teeth and it pops into my head and I spit take all over the mirror with toothpaste. And that is such an important part of the process too, to pay attention to what's working and to enjoy oh, I got this, it's working, and feel good about it and enjoy that growth and that the pleasures of it all, not just have it always be a grind. Sure. Because you have to pace yourself, right? There are no guarantees and you have to enjoy the process. And part of enjoying the process is taking it seriously and really thinking critically about what you do. But part of it is just enjoying it, right? It's just being there for the joy of it all. So that's one thing. And then the one other piece of advice that I have that I think is really, really important is that to be a writer, to write anything that matters, I think you have to develop your own internal compass about what you want to write about, what you want to say, and how you want to say it. And I think that the way that you find that compass is to pay attention to what you love, in other people's stories. If you're binge watching something on Netflix and something brings you to tears, or you find yourself rewinding so you can watch it again, or if you're reading a novel and you have this one chapter that you go back to over and over when it's over because you just loved it so much, right? If you have a book that kept you up all night, you need to stop and pay attention to that. What hooked you? What caught you? What mattered to you? What moved you, right? What did you connect to? And not only what was it, but how did that writer do that to you, right? Because those are the things that are working, the things that you love, those are the things that are going to teach you to be a better writer. I think more than anything else, that's how you learn to be better, is not by criticizing other people and being like, that dialogue was so wooden in that book. We're all tempted to do that. It feels good to roll your eyes at somebody else if you think they didn't do something well, but that's not helping you at all. What's helping you is noticing when somebody's doing something right, including yourself, and paying attention to it, saying how is this working? Take it and type it into a document separately of your own so you can feel what it feels like on your fingers, right? Do a deep dive and break it down by line and say, what happens in this moment? What happens in this moment? And really study it and really let it guide you. Because the thing that I keep thinking about over and over with young writers is that you cannot show yourself the path by looking at where not to go. You can only show yourself where to go by looking at where you want to be and what you want to do. And so I would say, pay attention to what you love, the stuff that is lighting your fire and getting you excited and that matters to you. That's going to guide you where you want to go.
Oh, I love it. So much good stuff there. Oh my gosh, Jen.
Well, I would say, first of all, one time I heard the wonderful Nora Roberts give an inspirational speech to writers. And she said, if you can possibly quit writing, then you should. And I thought, that's not very inspirational. But then I realized what she was saying. What she was saying is, unless you are in love with the process of writing, unless you are loving it, there are easier ways to make a living. This is not easy. And also not everyone can do it. Nora was saying that she can't stop writing. She just can't. So, but she's saying, hey man, if you can quit, then if you have it in you to say, I could take it or leave it, then leave it, is what she was saying, because it's not something everyone can do. And it's not easy. On the practical level, what I would say is read as much as you possibly can and analyze why you're reacting and responding to the things. Katherine was saying the same thing. What is lighting your fire when you're reading? The other thing I would say is write and finish your book. And don't say, I'm going to just write, I'm going to try to sell it on a partial, or if you're not published, you should write and finish your book. And then when you finish that book, you should write the next one. And even if that one doesn't sell, you should write the next one, because I can guarantee you your 10th book will be better than your first book. So you want to keep getting better and better and better. And maybe your 10th book is the one that gets published. Maybe your 10th book gets you to a place of expertise in your craft that it's ready. So, and I would also say, connect with other writers, join groups and organizations like this one, enter contests, network. Definitely, I would say get an agent. Don't try to go it alone. Honestly, you're not taking that seriously if you're querying editors directly. It's like, just do yourself that favor. Don't query editors directly, get an agent. And somebody once said, well, getting an agent to pay attention to you is harder than getting an editor to pay attention to you. So don't take the path of least resistance. Still take the path of resistance and get an agent. You need it for the business part of it. You need it for your mental headspace, and you need it to be taken seriously. And you can get an agent by identifying the authors that you feel are similar in style, mood, and tone to your books, and query them. On every agent's website is a way to query them. And I can tell you from talking to literally dozens of agents every month, they all find authors this way. They all read their submissions. They want to find new people.
And the reality is that a lot of publishers aren't taking unagented material. So I remember when I started as an assistant at St. Martin's, we used to sit around in a little tiny closet room and have pizza and beer and read all of the slush letters that came in, because St. Martin's was one of the last publishers that really did go through every slush letter. And I can't imagine that's still happening.
We don't have it anymore.
Yeah.
We don't accept that. So
yeah. So you do need an agent for the process. And of course, for those of you who are asking agent questions, we are focusing on the editor author side of it, but for sure, we are in the right hands here at the Writers League, and reach out to us because we talk all the time about the agent side. I do want to get to just a couple questions before we let you go. Jen, this one's for you. What is one thing that you wish that all your authors did that made the process easier and better across the board, from the first round of edits all the way through to the paperback? Is there one particular thing that you would say, not, of course, Katherine is doing everything right, but like maybe just in general, I wish my authors X?
Katherine doesn't do this, but it has been done in the past where authors will hand in a manuscript and they'll say, oh, it's a total mess. It doesn't have an ending. The middle is just impenetrable. It's terrible, but here you go. I know you know how to fix it. And I'm always like, you know what? Why don't you try to get it? I think that might be also an author, like a little bit of an author insecurity, like they're gonna criticize their own book before you can. But I'm a little bit like, oh, please, like I can help you so much better if you at least get it to where it's not an impediment, where I don't have to go in, what I say, with a machete and a flashlight, that kind of thing. The other thing on a practical level, this is so funny. You'd be amazed at how many seasoned authors hand in a manuscript, because it all gets sent on a Word doc over email. They hand in a manuscript and they don't number the pages. And when I edit, I'm always editing on hard copy. So there I go, and I print out the manuscript and I settle down to edit, and I realize there are no page numbers. And that means if I drop it or if I lose my place at all, I'm screwed. There has been times when I've actually gone through and hand numbered a manuscript because I didn't want to kill more trees by printing out another version.
Yeah. And what about during, as they're moving through the process? I know the person who asked this question has actually a novel coming out later this year. And I'm guessing that what she's wondering too is there a certain kind of communication error that writers might make, or that, you don't?
I wouldn't worry about that. So many writers worry about pissing off their editors or their publishers. You guys are the talent, not us. We should worry about pissing off you. That's the way I see it. Don't worry about if you're a normal human being, there's truly, here's the answer to that question. If you're the person that would worry about that, then you're probably fine. It's the person that would never worry about it that you have to worry about.
Yeah. Jen, could you speak briefly? We've talked about the summer months because Katherine owns the summer, right? Her books come out in the summer. People are waiting for her books in the summer. But could you just really briefly, how many seasons does St. Martin's publish into? Is it what, winter,
Great.
summer, fall?
There's the winter. Those are books published between January and April. There's summer. Those are books published between May and August. And there's fall. And those are books published between September and December.
Yeah. You know what? I'm looking at the rest of our questions, and I actually think I'll end with asking Katherine this last question. I think it's a great one because you both talked about building your community and how important it is to have, those connections. And so, Katherine, for you, how do you sustain that? How do you build your community? And or do you have any tips for writers who are looking to kind of find those writing critique friends or those people that they, are going to commiserate with? We love to build, obviously here at the Writers Lake, a lot of community, but I'm wondering what you're doing and what you've done for yourself.
I'm a terrible person to ask this question of because I have not done a great job of doing this. And
come hang out with us.
I know.
You have, Katherine. I feel like you have because you when other authors come to tour, you interview them. You have so many author friends. I mean, I feel like you do good job.
That's true. I mean, yes. Like, here's the thing. I'm very introverted, but I am also, I don't know, I'm like a hybrid because I can be extroverted. If I'm doing an event, I'll be extroverted, or if I'm speaking at a big luncheon or something. But then I'll have to come home and take a 3-hour nap. I feel like for most of my writing career, I've had little kids. And so I've been trying to write books. I've been trying to write books around my duties, raising kids and sort of being a human. And that was all the bandwidth that I had, I'm like, that was it. That was all I had. So I wasn't out like, I need to put this in a book. I want to write about, besties and all of that, but I've not done a very good job with the work-life balance. And the thing that got sort of pushed out, I'm great with imaginary people. I'm great with books. I'm great with kids. But the thing that got pushed out was like building that sense of community. I do broadly have a sense of community. I love bookstores. I love people. When I see people, I'm great, but I'm not like doing like a weekly coffee clatch with other writers where I'm, hanging out and eating bagels or something. But I'm working on it, and my youngest child is about to go off to college in a year and a half. And then I'm hoping that, I'll have a little bit more time to do that.
Well, I think it's safe to say that there are about 71 people in the room, more people on YouTube, and plenty of people who are going to be watching this who would like to have coffee with you and spend some time with you. I do want to mention again and again and again, and I know we'll drop the link in again. I love this book so much. I'm so excited for this to publish next month. And we're going to encourage everyone to pre-order Hello Stranger and also check out, of course, if you haven't, Katherine's backlist. But this has just been a real honor to chat with you two and to get to see your dynamic and to get to hear you talk about the way that you work together, the way that you work separately, and just to see the clear admiration between you. And it's just there's a lot that goes into making a book work and making a successful writing career. And it's, part of it is what we're talking about tonight. And so thank you for your time. Thank you for
Thank you, Becca. Becca, you're a wonderful moderator. You really are.
I appreciate it.
You really are.
Come back anytime, baby.
Yeah, I'd love it.
It's been a pleasure. And I want to thank everyone out there listening in for being here with us tonight. We're going to make sure that you get lots of good follow-up links and things so that you can support our two wonderful guests. But yeah, have a good rest of your Thursday. And we appreciate you. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, everyone. Loved being part of this.
Me too. Same.
All right. Take
care. Have a great summer, everyone. Have a great summer. Okay. Bye.
Bye.